All right, so this model we're going to be looking at here is a model of the ear. And so I like that right now we can see that this is part of the temporal bone. And the temporal bone here is all of this, everything that we're looking at is encased within the temporal bone. And so this part here we can see when we remove this, and this is going to be that external acoustic meatus of the temporal bone, right? And so you can see over here the external acoustic meatus of the temporal bone. And that's going to be like attached to our external ear. And then we can see here, let's remove this. This is going to be the upper part of the temporal bone, and you can see that there is the petrous part of the temporal bone, and there are hollow openings inside the temporal bone where all of your inner ear, middle and inner ear apparatus are going to live. So as we look through this model, we're going to divide it into three areas. And the first one is the external ear. So the external ear here is probably going to be sort of the easiest to see. This is the part we can see from the outside. And we call this outside area the auricle or the pinna. And so you guys are probably really familiar with that. As we go through, this guy right here is going to be, the common name for it is the ear canal, but I want you guys to call it the external acoustic meatus or the external auditory meatus. It's going to end here at what we commonly know as the eardrum. So this guy right here. And so this is going to be the external ear. So we have the pinna or the auricle, then we have the external acoustic meatus or external auditory meatus, and it ends here at the tympanic membrane, which is the also known as the eardrum. But I don't want you guys to call it eardrum on the lab practical. I want you to call it tympanic membrane. You will not get credit for eardrum. Just like you won't get credit for ear canal, I want you to call it external auditory meatus or external acoustic meatus. So that's the external ear, and now we're moving to the middle ear, and the middle ear is going to be this area right here. So it starts at the tympanic membrane, and then it's going to include this tympanic cavity here. So if we look here, we'll remove this. This is what the tympanic membrane kind of looks like, and you can see it kind of looks like a drum. And then on the back of this, we have some of our auditory ossicles attached. They're not really that closely attached. They do have ligaments and everything, but they are separate bones. And so this is going to be our tympanic membrane here, or our tympanic membrane here. And then this would be towards the external ear, and then this is towards the middle ear, right here. And so we have three little tiny bones. These are the only bones that we haven't talked about yet. And so these are called the auditory ossicles collectively. And so you have three on either side, so 6 total. And so the auditory ossicles, first you have the malleus, which looks a little bit like a hammer or a mallet. Next we have the incus, which looks a little bit like an anvil. And then the last one is going to be located here, and it's shown attached to the inner ear. It will be like this. And this little guy right here is the stapes. It looks a little bit like a stirrup on an English saddle, if you have done horseback riding. So we have the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, and I remember that by remembering MIS, or miss. So from external towards inner ear, we have MIS, malleus, incus, stapes. And so these collectively are the auditory ossicles. And so when the sound vibrations get to the tympanic membrane and they vibrate the tympanic membrane, that's going to vibrate the malleus, which vibrates the incus and vibrates the stapes. And this actually amplifies the sound. And that stapes is going to be attached, or it's sitting right against this whole area here, which is the inner ear. And so this part right here where the stapes is sitting on and against the inner ear is called the oval window, and it's going to be like this oval shape. And it vibrates in the oval window, and the oval window is like a malleable membrane, whereas the rest of this is kind of hard. And that lets the vibrations be transmitted from the middle ear to the fluid inside the inner ear. So let's put this guy back here. All right, so let's turn it a little bit. So we have the tympanic membrane here, the malleus, the incus, the stapes. And these are all going to be found within this tympanic cavity, which is the opening inside that petrous part of the temporal bone. And so this has, this should be filled with air, but it does not communicate with the external ear. So there should be no, there are no holes in the tympanic membrane, there shouldn't be, so there's no way that air can get from, or water can get from this ear canal into the middle ear. But there is another kind of connection with the outside. So we have this little guy right here, and this is called the pharyngotympanic tube, or the auditory tube. And this is going to connect, or it's also called the eustachian tube. So it has a lot of names. This connects the tympanic cavity in the middle ear down into the throat. And so if you ever like pop your ears, or like you yawn and your ears pop, that's just because the pressure, the air is kind of moving in up and down this pharyngotympanic tube and equalizing the pressure inside and outside of your tympanic membrane. So the air can get trapped inside this, because right, this is all bone everywhere around it except for this little area. And so the air inside your tympanic cavity, like let's say if you're going up in an airplane, or if you're scuba diving and going down deep, as the pressure changes, the size of the air can change, and so then sometimes air needs to escape down through here, or more air needs to come up in order to like equalize the pressure. All right, so that was our middle ear. So now we'll move to the inner ear, and we sort of talked about the inner ear a little bit already. So the inner ear is going to be this complicated area that's way, deep inside the temporal bone here. And it's going to be made up of this little guy right here. So I'll take it out so it's a little bit easier to see. So this is going to be our inner ear. And so we have a couple of different pieces of it. So, and we can see the inner ear is also attached to this, and this is yellow, so that indicates this a nerve. And so this is going to be really important for both hearing and equilibrium and balance. So we have two parts of it. So this part that looks like a snail shell over here is going to be the cochlea. And the cochlea is important for hearing, and we can kind of open this up and see that inside the cochlea we've got a bunch of different ducts, and we will talk about it in our PowerPoint, and then I have another model that goes through the cochlear duct. So know that this is going to be the cochlea, the part that looks like a snail shell, and it's going to be attached to the cochlear branch of the vestibulocochlear nerve, right? Because the cochlear branch of the vestibulocochlear nerve goes to the cochlea, and that all has to do with hearing. Then next, and that kind of includes this whole area over here. So we can see this is the stapes, which is part one of the bones in the middle ear, and it's going to be it's sitting right in the oval window. And the oval window is an important part because this is where the sound vibrations from the middle ear are transmitted into the cochlea, and they go through the cochlea over here. And then the sounds come through, and then eventually you have a round window down here, and this is kind of where, this is the other area where the vibrations go through. It allows the fluid to move within this area, because otherwise it would be, like there'd be too much pressure. So there's a little bit of motion, this kind of dampens the sound. So this is the round window. So we have the oval window here, which is at the very foot plate of the stapes, and we've got the round window down here. And that all of that is part of hearing and the cochlear apparatus. Next, we have this area right here. And so all of this is the vestibular apparatus. And the vestibular apparatus has to do with balance and equilibrium. And so we have two different parts of the vestibular apparatus. The vestibule, which is going to be sort of at the, in between the cochlea and this other part, which is called the semicircular canals. And so we have three semicircular canals. They're at sort of 90-degree right angles to each other. So we kind of have think of it almost like the X, Y, and Z axes. And they're going to be important for angular rotation of our head. And I've got a good video you guys can watch on that. And the middle part here is the vestibule. And the vestibule is made up of the utricle and the saccule. And the utricle is going to be right at the base of the semicircular canals, and the saccule is a little bit more in the middle. I have a bigger version of this on Perry that I will try to get a video of soon, because that'll probably make a little bit more sense, but you also have a really good labeled picture in your book that you can look at. So this is the inner ear. So the vestibule or vestibular apparatus is going to be attached, innervated by the vestibular branch of the vestibulocochlear nerve. And that's going to give your brain information about balance and equilibrium. All right, that's it for this model.